The emergency beacon screamed across the void of space, its desperate signal cutting through the cosmic background radiation like a knife through silk. Commander Sarah Chen felt the familiar knot in her stomach as she studied the distress call on her command screen aboard the UES Defiant, humanity's newest deep space rescue vessel. "Another one?" asked Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, her second in command, peering over her shoulder at the alien text scrolling across the display. "Looks like it," Sarah replied, her fingers dancing across the translation interface. The message was from the Kalani, a peaceful trading species known throughout the galaxy for their advanced agricultural techniques and their complete inability to defend themselves. "They're under attack by the Vorthak again." The bridge fell silent. Every human aboard knew about the Vorthak, a brutal warrior race that had been terrorizing the Outer Rim colonies for the past 3 years. They were efficient killers, standing nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms and natural body armor that could deflect most energy weapons. What made them truly dangerous wasn't just their physical prowess, but their complete lack of mercy. They took no prisoners, showed no quarter, and left nothing but ash and bone in their wake. "Sir," called out Ensign Park from the communications station, "the Kalani are specifically requesting human assistance. They're offering to pay triple the standard rescue fee." Sarah's jaw tightened. The Galactic Council had established rescue fees as a way to prevent species from taking unnecessary risks, but the fact that the Kalani were willing to pay 3 times the normal rate meant they were truly desperate. She'd met Kalani before. They were gentle, almost childlike in their innocence, with large eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of the universe. The thought of them being slaughtered by the Vorthak made her blood boil. "How many ships are we talking about?" she asked. "According to the beacon, there are approximately 200 Kalani vessels in the convoy," reported Lieutenant Commander James Wu from the tactical station. "They're civilian transports, mostly families fleeing the Vorthak advance on their home system." "And the Vorthak force?" "Unknown, but if they're calling for help, it's probably significant." Sarah stared at the star map, watching the blinking red dot that represented the Kalani convoy. They were 3 days away at maximum warp, assuming the Defiant's engines could handle the strain. But 3 days might as well be 3 centuries if the Vorthak were already attacking. "Commander," said Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's chief medical officer, stepping onto the bridge. "I couldn't help but overhear. How many casualties are we expecting?" Sarah looked around at her crew, 43 humans against an unknown number of Vorthak warriors. By all accounts, it should be suicide. The Vorthak were apex predators, evolved on a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived. They were faster, stronger, and more durable than almost any species in the galaxy. But they had never fought humans before. "Set course for the Kalani position," Sarah ordered. "Maximum warp. And send word to command that we're responding to the distress call." "Ma'am," said Rodriguez quietly, "shouldn't we wait for backup? The UES retribution is only 6 days behind us." Sarah shook her head. 6 days is too long. The Kalani will be dead by then. She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "I won't lie to you. This is going to be dangerous. The Vorthak have never lost a battle, and they outnumber us significantly. But there are 200 civilian ships out there full of innocent people who are counting on us." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The Vorthak think they're the galaxy's apex predators. They've never encountered humans before, so they don't know what we're capable of. They're about to learn why Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world." The bridge erupted in grim smiles and nods of determination. Every human knew the classification system. Most inhabited worlds were Class 1 or 2 garden worlds with gentle weather, abundant resources, and few natural dangers. Earth was one of only 17 known Class 12 worlds, places so hostile that most species considered them uninhabitable. Worlds where the dominant species had to fight for survival from the moment they drew their first breath. The Vorthak had conquered dozens of species, but none of them had come from a death world. "Estimated time to arrival?" Sarah asked. 2 days, 18 hours at current speed, reported the helmsman. "Not fast enough. Engineering, I need everything you can give me." Chief Engineer Tommy O'Brien's voice crackled over the intercom. "Commander, if I push the engines any harder, we risk a core breach. Then push them just short of that point, Sarah replied. We need every minute we can get. As the Defiant accelerated beyond its recommended maximum speed, Sarah felt the familiar weight of command settling on her shoulders. She'd been in combat before: the Centauri border wars, the Rigel incident, the suppression of the Proxima rebellion. But this was different. This wasn't about human interests or political disputes. This was about protecting the innocent, and in her mind, that made it the most important mission she'd ever undertaken. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. The crew worked around the clock, modifying weapons systems, reinforcing hull plating, and drilling combat scenarios. Dr. Vasquez converted 2 cargo bays into emergency medical facilities, anticipating heavy casualties. The ship's small complement of Marines, led by Sergeant Major Lisa Thompson, conducted endless boarding drills and close-quarters combat exercises. But perhaps most importantly, they studied everything they could about the Vorthack. "They're impressive," admitted Lieutenant Commander Wu as he briefed the senior staff. Average height of 2.4 meters, forearms with opposable thumbs, natural bone armor covering 70% of their body surface. They're roughly 3 times stronger than the average human and twice as fast. Weaknesses? Asked Rodriguez. Limited. Their bone armor has gaps at the joints, and their respiratory system is similar to ours, so they can be affected by atmospheric toxins. But honestly, sir, they're built for war. Their entire culture revolves around combat and conquest. Sarah nodded grimly. What about their technology? Advanced but not exceptional. Their ships rely on heavy armor and powerful weapons rather than speed or maneuverability. They prefer close-quarters combat to long-range engagement. That might work in our favor, mused Rodriguez. Human ships are faster and more maneuverable. Maybe, Sarah said. But we're still going to be outnumbered. We need to think outside the box. 18 hours before they reached the Kalani convoy, the Defiant's long-range sensors finally got a clear picture of what they were up against. The news was worse than they'd feared. Jesus Christ, whispered Ensign Park. Commander, you need to see this. The main screen showed a tactical display of the Kalani convoy's position. The 200 civilian transports were arranged in a loose formation, their shields flickering as they tried to maintain defensive positions. But surrounding them like sharks circling wounded prey were 47 Vorthack vessels, a mixture of destroyers, cruisers, and one massive dreadnought that dwarfed anything in the human fleet. They're not attacking, observed Wu. They're hurting them. Sarah studied the display, her mind racing. The Vorthack ships were maintaining perfect formation, keeping the Kalani vessels contained but not delivering the killing blow. It was a classic predator tactic: exhaust the prey before moving in for the kill. They're playing with them, she said, her voice cold with rage. They're terrorizing those people for sport. Commander, said Rodriguez quietly, we can't fight 47 ships. It's suicide. Sarah knew he was right. Even with the Defiant's advanced human technology, they were hopelessly outnumbered. A direct assault would accomplish nothing except getting her crew killed and leaving the Kalani to their fate. But as she stared at the tactical display, an idea began to form in her mind. It was insane, probably suicidal, and went against every rule of naval warfare. But it might just work. Get me a secure channel to Chief O'Brien, she ordered. Minutes later, the chief engineer's weathered face appeared on her personal screen. What can I do for you, Commander? I need to know if you can overload the main reactor core and contain the explosion for exactly 30 seconds. O'Brien's eyes widened. Commander, that's basically turning the ship into a bomb. The radiation alone would kill everyone aboard. Not if we're in the escape pods, Sarah replied. Can you do it? Theoretically, yes. But why would you want to? Sarah explained her plan, watching as O'Brien's expression shifted from horror to understanding to grudging admiration. It's crazy, Commander. But it might work. Give me 6 hours to rig the system. You have 4. As O'Brien set to work, Sarah called a meeting of her senior staff. She laid out her plan in detail, watching as their faces went through the same progression of emotions she'd seen in the engineer. So let me get this straight, said Dr. Vasquez. You want to ram the Vorthack dreadnought, detonate our reactor core, and hope the explosion is big enough to take out their command ship? That's the basic idea, Sarah confirmed. But first, we need to get close enough to make it count. How do we do that without getting blown out of space? Asked Rodriguez. Sarah smiled grimly. We surrender. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Sergeant Major Thompson spoke up. Commander, the Vorthack don't take prisoners. They'll kill us the moment we lower our shields. Not if we convince them we're worth more alive than dead, Sarah replied. We're the first humans they've ever encountered. They'll be curious about us, our technology, our capabilities. That curiosity might buy us the time we need. And if it doesn't, asked Wu. Then we die fighting, and at least we'll have tried. The debate continued for another hour, but eventually, the senior staff agreed to the plan. It was desperate, probably suicidal, but it was their only chance to save the Kalani convoy. As the Defiant approached the edge of the battlefield, Sarah stood on the bridge in her dress uniform, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Around her, the crew worked with quiet efficiency, each person knowing their role in the desperate gambit about to unfold. Vorthack vessels are hailing us, reported Ensign Park. They're laughing. Sarah wasn't surprised. To the Vorthack, the sight of a single human ship approaching their massive fleet must have seemed like a joke. They had no idea what humans were capable of, no understanding of the fury that could be unleashed when Deathworlders were pushed too far. Put them through, she ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the Vorthack dreadnought. The ship's commander was a massive specimen, even by Vorthack standards. His forearms were covered in ritual scars, and his bone armor was decorated with the skulls of his enemies. When he spoke, his voice was like grinding stone. I am War Master Thokval of the Crimson Fong, he rumbled. You will surrender your vessel or be destroyed. Sarah stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. I am Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Defiant. We're here to escort the Kalani convoy to safety. The War Master's laughter was like the sound of breaking glass. One ship? You would challenge the might of the Vorthack Empire with one ship? If necessary, Sarah replied calmly. Thokval leaned forward, his small eyes studying her with newfound interest. You are not like the other species we have conquered. There is no fear in you, only rage. What are you? We're human, Sarah said simply. And we don't abandon innocence to be slaughtered by cowards who prey on the weak. The War Master's expression darkened. Cowards? You dare call the Vorthack cowards? I call them what they are, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the danger. A species so weak they can only win by attacking defenseless civilians. Where I come from, we have a name for creatures like you bullies. The bridge of the dreadnought erupted in angry snarls and the clash of weapons against armor. But Thokval raised one of his hands, and the noise subsided. You have spirit, human. I will enjoy breaking you. He paused, his head tilting thoughtfully. But first, I would learn more about your species. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in the immediate destruction of your vessel. Sarah glanced at Rodriguez, who nodded almost imperceptibly. The first phase of the plan was working. Lowering shields, she said. But I warn you, humans don't break easily. We shall see. As the Defiant's shields dropped, Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was gambling with the lives of her crew, betting everything on a desperate plan that might not work. But as she looked around at the faces of her officers, each one calm, determined, ready to die for strangers they'd never met, she knew she'd made the right choice. The Vorthack boarding shuttles approached slowly, their hulls bristling with weapons. Sarah watched them on the tactical display, counting ships, estimating troop numbers, calculating the odds. By her estimate, they were about to be boarded by nearly 200 Vorthack warriors. All hands, prepare for boarding, she announced over the ship's intercom. Remember, we're supposed to be surrendering. Don't resist unless absolutely necessary. The first shuttle docked with the Defiant's main airlock, and Sarah felt the vibration through the deck plating as the boarding tube extended. She straightened her uniform one final time and walked to the airlock, her senior staff flanking her. The airlock cycled, and suddenly the corridor was filled with Vorthak warriors. They were even more impressive in person, towering figures encased in bone armor, their forearms ending in claws that could shred steel. They moved with the fluid grace of apex predators, their small eyes constantly scanning for threats. The leader of the boarding party was a massive warrior with fresh scars across his face. He pointed one of his claws at Sarah and spoke in broken English. "You, surrender leader?" "I am," Sarah replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'm Commander Sarah Chen." The warrior studied her for a long moment, then barked orders in his own language. Immediately, his troops began spreading throughout the ship, securing key areas and rounding up the crew. Sarah watched as her people were herded into the main cargo bay, their faces calm despite the danger. "War Master, want see you," the boarding party leader said. "You come now." Sarah nodded and followed him back to the shuttle. As they walked, she caught glimpses of her crew through the windows, Dr. Vasquez treating a wounded ensign, Chief O'Brien working frantically at an engineering console, Sergeant Major Thompson coordinating the ship's defenses from the shadows. The shuttle ride to the dreadnought was brief, but it gave Sarah time to study her captors. The Vorthak warriors were clearly confident, almost bored by the ease of their victory. They had no idea that in exactly 3 hours, their entire fleet would be vaporized by a human reactor core overload. The dreadnought's docking bay was a cathedral of violence, its walls lined with weapons and the skulls of conquered enemies. Sarah was escorted through corridors that reeked of death and decay, past chambers where she could hear the screams of other prisoners. Her jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. The bridge of the dreadnought was a monument to Vorthak brutality. War Master Thokval sat on a throne made from the bones of his enemies, his forearms resting on armrests carved with scenes of conquest and slaughter. Around him, dozens of Vorthak officers went about their duties, their movements precise and efficient. "Ah, the human commander," Thokval rumbled as Sarah was brought before him. "You are smaller than I expected. How does such a tiny creature command a warship?" "The same way you do," Sarah replied. "With competence and the respect of my crew." Thokval's laugh was like grinding stone. "Respect? A warrior commands through strength, not respect. Watch." He gestured to one of his officers, who immediately dropped to his knees. With casual brutality, Thokval struck the officer across the face, leaving deep claw marks in his armor. The officer didn't even flinch. "That is how the Vorthak command," Thokval said. "Through fear and pain. Your crew will learn this lesson soon enough." Sarah's hands clenched into fists, but she forced herself to remain calm. "My crew will never serve you." "Oh, but they will," Thokval purred. "After I kill half of them to demonstrate my power, the survivors will beg for the privilege of serving the Vorthak Empire. It is the way of things." "Not with humans," Sarah said quietly. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Enlighten me," Thokval said, leaning forward with interest. "What makes humans so special?" "You are weak, fragile, slow. What could possibly make you think you can stand against the might of the Vorthak?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "We're Deathworlders." The bridge fell silent. Even the Vorthak officers stopped their work to stare at her. Thokval's eyes widened slightly. "Impossible," he said. "Deathworlds produce only monsters and madmen. You are neither." "Aren't I?" Sarah asked. "You've conquered dozens of species, War Master. How many of them were willing to die for strangers? How many of them would sacrifice everything to protect people they'd never met?" "None," Thokval admitted. "But that is not strength, it is foolishness." "Is it?" Sarah asked. "Or is it the kind of strength that only comes from a world that tries to kill you every day?" "You see, War Master, the Vorthak evolved on a world where strength was everything. But humans evolved on a world where cooperation was the only way to survive. We learned to work together, to sacrifice for each other, to never abandon our own. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You think you're apex predators? You're nothing but bullies who prey on the weak. But humans are the real monsters. We're the species that looked at a death world and said, we're going to live here anyway. We're the species that turned cooperation into a weapon more deadly than any claw or fang. Fakval's expression had shifted from amusement to uncertainty. You speak of cooperation, yet you came here alone. Did I? Sarah asked, a small smile playing at her lips. War Master, did you really think one ship was going to challenge your entire fleet? Did you really think I was that stupid? For the first time since the conversation began, Fakval looked genuinely worried. What are you saying? I'm saying that while you were busy gloating over your easy victory, my crew was turning my ship into a weapon you can't possibly imagine. And in about. Sarah glanced at her wrist chronometer, 2 hours and 15 minutes, you're going to learn why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The War Master surged to his feet, his forearms reaching for his weapons. You lie. Do I? Sarah asked calmly. Tell me, War Master, what do you know about reactor core overloads? What do you know about the kind of explosion that can vaporize a dreadnought from the inside out? Fakval's eyes widened in horror. You would destroy your own ship? In a heartbeat, Sarah replied. That's what you don't understand about humans. We don't just fight for victory, we fight for what's right. And if dying is what it takes to protect the innocent, then we'll die gladly. The War Master began barking orders in his own language, and his officers scattered to their stations. But Sarah wasn't finished. You know what the beautiful thing is? She continued. Even if you kill me right now, it won't stop what's coming. My crew knows their duty. They'll die before they'll let you hurt those Kalani families. Fakval raised one of his claws, the tip hovering inches from Sarah's throat. I could end you here and now. You could, Sarah agreed. But then you'd never know if I was lying. And in 2 hours, when your entire fleet is reduced to cosmic dust, you'll spend your final moments wondering if you could have prevented it. The War Master's hand trembled with rage, but he didn't strike. Instead, he turned to his tactical officer. Status of the human vessel. All systems appear normal, War Master, the officer reported. However, our boarding party reports unusual activity in their engineering section. What kind of activity? Unknown. Their engineers appear to be making modifications to their power systems. Fakval's eyes narrowed. Can we stop them? Not without destroying the vessel, War Master. And if they have indeed rigged their reactor to overload? The explosion would destroy us as well, Fakval finished. He turned back to Sarah, his expression now showing genuine respect mixed with fear. You are insane. No, Sarah replied. I'm human. There's a difference. The next hour passed in tense silence. Fakval had ordered his fleet to increase the distance between themselves and the Defiant, but Sarah's smile told him it wouldn't be enough. The War Master found himself studying this strange human female, trying to understand the mindset that would drive someone to such extremes. Tell me about your world, he said finally. Sarah raised an eyebrow. My world? Earth. What kind of planet produces beings like you? Sarah's expression softened slightly. Earth is beautiful, she said. Blue oceans, green forests, mountains that touch the sky. But it's also trying to kill you every moment of every day. Hurricanes that can level cities. Earthquakes that can swallow entire populations. Diseases that can wipe out species. Ice ages that last for millennia. And yet your species thrived, Fakval observed. We more than thrived, Sarah replied. We learned to master our environment instead of just surviving in it. We learned to work together because cooperation was the only way to survive. We learned to sacrifice for each other because abandoning our own meant death for everyone. But surely not all humans are like this, Fakval said. Surely some are cowards, some are selfish. Of course, Sarah admitted. But even our cowards and selfish people have limits. Push them far enough, threaten the innocent, and they'll become heroes.
It's who we are. Fakval was quiet for a long moment. If your reactor overloads, you will die as well. Yes. Your crew will die. Yes. For people you have never met. Yes. The War Master shook his head. I do not understand.
That's why you're going to lose, Sarah said simply. You see strength as individual power, but real strength comes from knowing that some things are worth dying for. The Kalani convoy isn't just a bunch of strangers to my crew, they're innocents who need protection.
That makes them our responsibility. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then.
Fakval stared at her for a long moment, then turned to his communications officer.
Open a channel to the human vessel. This is the Defiant, came Chief O'Brien's voice. What do you want?
I want to speak to whoever is in charge of your engineering section, Fakval replied. There was a pause, then O'Brien's voice again.
That would be me. Chief Engineer Tommy O'Brien. Chief O'Brien, I am War Master Fakval. I understand you have rigged your reactor to overload.
That's correct, O'Brien replied calmly.
In about 43 minutes, this ship is going to become a very large bomb.
I'd suggest you release our people and withdraw your fleet.
And if we refuse? Then you'll get a first-hand demonstration of why humans are classified as Deathworlders. Fakval looked at Sarah, who nodded grimly. He's not bluffing, War Master.
My crew would rather die than let you hurt those families.
This is madness, Fakval muttered. This is humanity, Sarah corrected.
The War Master began pacing, his forearms gesturing wildly as he spoke. You would destroy your own ship, kill your own crew, just to protect aliens you have never met?
In a heartbeat, Sarah replied. But there's something you should know, War Master. This isn't just about the Kalani convoy. This is about sending a message to every bully and tyrant in the galaxy. Humans are out here now, and we don't tolerate the strong preying on the weak. You speak as though your single ship represents your entire species, Fakval said. It does, Sarah replied. Every human ship, every human crew, every human commander would make the same choice.
We'd rather die than live in a galaxy where innocents are slaughtered for sport.
Fakval stopped pacing and stared at her. You truly believe that?
I know it, Sarah said firmly.
Because that's what being human means. We don't abandon our own, we don't prey on the weak, and we never, ever give up.
The War Master was quiet for a long moment, then suddenly roared in fury.
I will not be defeated by a single human ship. All vessels, target the Defiant. Destroy them now.
War Master, no, his tactical officer shouted.
If their reactor is rigged to overload, the explosion will destroy half the fleet. Then we die as warriors. Fakval snarled. I will not be humiliated by these Deathworlders.
But before he could give the order to fire, alarms began blaring throughout the dreadnought.
The tactical officer's face went pale.
War Master, we're detecting massive energy signatures at the edge of the system.
Multiple contacts, closing fast. How many? Fakval demanded. 37 vessels and counting, the officer replied. They're human ships, War Master. The entire Third Fleet.
Sarah's smile was radiant.
You didn't really think I came here alone, did you?
On the main screen, the human fleet materialized out of hyperspace like avenging angels. Sleek destroyers, heavily armed cruisers, and 3 massive battleships that dwarfed even the Vortak dreadnought.
At their head flew the UES Retribution, Admiral Catherine Morrison's flagship.
This is Admiral Morrison to all Vortak vessels, came a voice over the communications channel. You have 30 seconds to release our people and withdraw from this system.
Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your fleet.
Fakval's eyes were wide with shock.
Impossible. How did they know? Because we're not just warriors, Sarah explained. We're planners.
Every human ship is equipped with a subspace beacon that activates when we're in mortal danger.
The moment your people boarded my ship, the Third Fleet knew exactly where we were.
You used yourself as bait, Thakvel said, his voice filled with something that might have been admiration.
I used myself as a weapon, Sarah corrected. Because sometimes that's what it takes to protect the innocent.
The War Master looked around at his officers, seeing the same fear in their eyes that he felt in his hearts.
The Vorthak were brave, but they weren't suicidal. Facing a human fleet of that size would be massacre.
All vessels, withdraw to safe distance, he ordered reluctantly.
Release the human prisoners. War Master, one of his officers asked uncertainly. Do it. Thakval roared. We are warriors, not fools. We will not throw away our lives in a battle we cannot win.
As the Vorthak fleet began to withdraw, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Rodriguez and the rest of her senior staff, their faces grim but determined.
Good to see you, Commander, Rodriguez said.
Though I have to say, next time you want to play chicken with a reactor core, maybe give us a little more warning.
There won't be a next time, Sarah replied.
After today, every species in the galaxy will know what happens when you threaten innocents while humans are watching.
The rescue operation proceeded smoothly after that. The Kalani convoy was escorted to safety, their families reunited and their faith in the goodness of the universe restored.
The Vorthak fleet withdrew to their own territory, their reputation as unstoppable conquerors forever tarnished. But the real victory came 3 days later, when the Galactic Council emergency session convened. Sarah stood before the assembled representatives of dozens of species, her dress uniform pristine despite everything she'd been through. The events at the Kalani convoy demonstrate a fundamental truth, she told the assembly.
The galaxy is only as safe as we make it.
For too long, peaceful species have been terrorized by aggressive neighbors while the rest of us stood by and watched.
That ends now.
She gestured to Admiral Morrison, who stepped forward with a datapad. The Human Federation is hereby proposing the formation of a mutual defense alliance. Any species that agrees to the principles of protecting the innocent and defending the weak will have the full support of the human fleet.
The Kalani delegate, a gentle creature with large eyes and soft fur, stood up. The Kalani people pledge our support to this alliance. We have seen the courage of humans, and we know they can be trusted. One by one, other delegates stood.
The Andromedans, the Centauri, the Rigelians, species that had been victims of aggression for generations finally saw hope for a better future. But it was the Vorthak delegate who surprised everyone. War Master Thakval himself stood before the assembly, his forearms held wide in a gesture of respect. The Vorthak Empire has been humbled by our encounter with humanity, he said, his voice carrying across the chamber. We have learned that true strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the willingness to protect.
We request permission to join this alliance.
The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Sarah stepped forward, her expression thoughtful.
War Master, she said, can you give us your word that the Vorthak will never again prey on the innocent? Thakval met her gaze steadily.
You have my word, Commander Chen.
The Vorthak have been warriors for so long, we forgot what we were fighting for.
You reminded us that strength without purpose is just brutality. Sarah studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Then welcome to the Alliance, War Master.
There's a lot of work to do.
As the session continued, Sarah found herself thinking about the events of the past few days. The Defiant had been repaired, her crew had been decorated for bravery, and the galaxy had taken its first steps toward a more peaceful future. But the real victory wasn't in the medals or the accolades, it was in the knowledge that innocents would sleep safer because humans had been willing to stand up for what was right. Admiral Morrison approached her during a break in the proceedings. You know, Commander, what you did out there was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most foolish.
Maybe both, Sarah replied with a smile. But it worked, didn't it?
It worked, Morrison agreed.
The question is, what do we do now? Every species in the galaxy knows that humans are willing to die for strangers. That's going to bring both allies and enemies.
Sarah looked around at the assembled delegates, seeing hope in faces that had known only fear for too long. Then we'll face whatever comes, she said.
Together.
Because that's what being human means, we don't abandon our own, and we don't let the strong prey on the weak.
Even if it costs us everything? Especially then.
As the Galactic Council session resumed, Sarah took her place among the human delegation. The road ahead would be difficult, and there would be other battles to fight. But for the first time in generations, the galaxy had hope. Hope that the innocent would be protected, that the weak would be defended, and that bullies and tyrants would face consequences for their actions. The aliens had indeed witnessed the wrath of Deathworlders, but they'd also seen something else: the compassion, courage, and unbreakable spirit that made humans truly dangerous. Not because they were warriors, but because they were protectors. Not because they were strong, but because they were willing to sacrifice that strength for others.
The galaxy would never be the same.
The UES Defiant cruised through the Outer Rim territories, its hull gleaming with fresh repairs and new armor plating.
Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, watching the stars whirl past the viewport.
In the 6 months since the Kalani incident, as historians were already calling it, the galaxy had indeed changed. The Mutual Defense Alliance had grown to include over 200 species, from the mighty Andromedans to the humble Kalani. Trade routes that had been too dangerous to navigate for decades were now protected by joint patrols. Pirates and raiders who had once terrorized civilian shipping found themselves facing coordinated responses from multiple species. And at the center of it all were the humans, not as conquerors or overlords, but as guardians. Every human ship in the fleet carried the same standing orders: protect the innocent, defend the weak, and never abandon those in need.